Hi everyone, Brianna Dignard here and welcome back to my channel. I am joined here by a lovely supporting cast and I hope you're ready to sew another sea creature while I spit fun facts at you about that sea creature. And even if you're not ready, I am. So today, if you haven't already guessed, we're going to be sewing my favorite animal of all time, the killer whale. And I'm gonna tell you a lot about killer whales along the way. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're gonna end with this adorable creature. This is what we get to sew. And to do that, we're going to first need the pattern. This is available on my Etsy shop for only $2. $2 to sew yourself as many killer whales as possible. Again, a fantastic deal. It also includes a step-by-step tutorial with pictures of how to make this, so that tutorial along with this video should be very helpful to make this a really simple project. You'll need fabric, again a main fabric and a contrasting fabric. I'm going to use the same ones I used for my stingray, so I have a matching stingray and whale because what is the benefit of making your own stuffed animals if they can't all have the same color scheme? Eyes, again I'm using these craft safety eyes, but you can also use embroidery floss or another piece of black fabric to add eyes. Scissors, both fabric scissors and normal scissors for cutting out the pattern or cutting thread. Some needle, some thread. The thread I'm going to use later is actually currently in my sewing machine. You also need a sewing machine or, again, the patience to hand sew, which is something I do not have. And then finally, you're going to need your bag of polyfill to stuff your little critter up. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with showing you these pattern pieces, and then I will launch into talking about killer whales, which again is one of my favorite subjects. So the pattern pieces, when you originally get them, are gonna actually come as 7 pieces. There's a body piece, a tail piece, or like a belly piece, a tail piece, a upper body, and a tail piece attached to that, some fins, and then a piece, oh, I just dropped one on the floor. A piece that's called a saddle patch, and a piece that is called an eye patch. So that's 7 pieces, but the first steps of it have you taping together the belly piece to the big tail piece for one piece, and then the upper body to the other tail piece together. So you have one piece here. So by the time you're getting to cut out all the fabric, you have 5 pieces. So I'm gonna start cutting them out. Technically, the only piece that gets cut out is going to be, on the main fabric, is gonna be your upper body and 2 of your fins. And everything else is going to be cut out on your contrasting fabric, so a belly piece, your 2 eye patches, your saddle patch, which is cut on the fold, and 2 more fins. So I'm gonna start doing that while I tell you about killer whales. So I think killer whales are some of the most distinctive, distinctive whales out there. That's thanks to their black and white coloring and a lot of marketing from SeaWorld. Outside of bottlenose dolphins, I think killer whales are some of the most common whales. Oh, I lost my pin cushion somewhere along the way. There it is. Are some of the most common whales in aquaria or like marine parks. And they're actually, I don't know if some of you guys know this already, they're actually not technically whales, sort of. They're technically dolphins, but whales are, the group of whales consists of whales, dolphins, and porpoises. So all dolphins are whales, but not all whales are dolphins, which is kind of confusing, but that is indeed the way it is. So some of the main differences between like whales and dolphins is, one, it comes down to their body shape. So whales, actual whales, not dolphin whales, will be, wait, no, sorry, let me reverse that. So dolphins are a little bit more like elongated in their shape. They're a little bit more streamlined, like a torpedo. They also have kind of like elongated noses or beaks associated with them. And they will have a very prominent dorsal fin, so that is the fin that is on the back of them, while actual whales have no dorsal fin. So here I have, not more stuffed animals, I have a bottlenose dolphin stuffed animal, so you can see it's got an elongated beak and it's got a dorsal fin. And this is a humpback whale. It has kind of a sloping face and it has a very, very tiny dorsal fin. And some whales, like beluga whales, don't have a dorsal fin at all. Thank you for the help. Whales also will have I already said that. Whales will have fused neck vertebrae to keep their heads like supported, because they've got pretty massive heads. And dolphins will continue to have flexible necks. So while dolphins are whales, but not all whales are dolphins, there are some differences between them that are important. So killer whales are dolphins, and above that they are also toothed whales. So you have like humpback whales, blue whales, gray whales, all have baleen, or these plates hanging down from their mouth. They are filter feeders. And killer whales, dolphins, sperm whales, belugas, porpoises, they all have teeth that they use to actually eat food. All right, so I got my pieces cut out of my main fabric. So that is the 2 side pieces and 2 fins. So now I'm going to finally install a trash can underneath my table. Toss my fabric to the side and start using my contrasting fabric to cut out the remaining pieces. All right. So I'm gonna shut up for a second. So far, I have gotten the upper body pieces, 2 fins out of the main fabric, 2 fins out of contrasting fabric, and the belly piece cut out of the contrasting fabric. I wanna take a second to go back to killer whales and talk about the features that are involved on this pattern. So you'll notice on here, or if you just look at a picture of a killer whale, they have what are called these eye patches behind their eyes, and then they also have markings behind their dorsal fin called a saddle patch. These are actually unique for each whale, and this is how researchers could tell them apart. So some of the populations of whales that live specifically in the Pacific Northwest off the coast of Washington State in the United States are all cataloged by their markings, their unique markings. They also have unique markings on their tail. There are their flukes. And these are all cataloged, and researchers can study them, track them, and they all have names. So if you go online and just look up San Juan killer whales or southern resident killer whale populations, there's a whole bunch of information with names and what family they're a part of and all this cool stuff. Specifically for the saddle patch piece, while cutting it out, this side needs to be cut on the fold. So all that means is you're just gonna fold over your fabric and place your piece like that on the fold to cut it out. So in addition to an eye patch and a saddle patch, killer whales also have, again, I mentioned earlier, a prominent dorsal fin. And this is one of the cases where the male killer whales will differ from the females, is that males have that really tall, pointy, very tall dorsal fin, while females will have a little bit more of a sloped dorsal fin that's a little bit smaller. Let me see if, I don't actually know if any of my, does not appear any of my stuffed animals over on the floor over there follow that correct pattern as far as I can tell. And the male killer whales will also be bigger than the female killer whales. So those are 2 ways kind of to tell the difference between a male killer whale and a female killer whale, whether you're visiting SeaWorld or you see one out in the wild. So I believe I have all my pattern pieces cut out. Again, the pieces I already showed you, plus my saddle patch, plus 2 eye patches. So we can go ahead and get to sewing and get to more fun facts about killer whales. So the first step for sewing this is we have to pin our 2 upper body pieces together, and we're going to sew along the top part of it. So all the way along its top part, around its dorsal fin, to this flat line down here. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin that and talk about killer whales more. So did you know there's actually 10 types of killer whales? And scientists are still debating whether or not there should be more. So this isn't actually 10 different species of killer whales. They're also considered the same species, but they're considered to be what is called different ecotypes. So an ecotype is basically what happens along the way to becoming a separate species. They still have enough genetic information in common with each other to, like, if they wanted to interact or reproduce with one another, but they have very different diets, live in some different locations, have different behaviors, even different languages with how they speak to each other. So almost like how everybody on this planet is a human, but humans come in all different shapes, colors, cultures, food, diets, locations, but they're still humans. The 10 different types of killer whales, or 10 different ecotypes of killer whales, are all still killer whales, but they are all have just a little bit different, and some even have different physical characteristics from another. I'll get into that more in a second, but I'm gonna go ahead and sew across the top line of the main body portion. Okay, I've gotten them sewed together, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn it out, and we're gonna start talking about the different ecotypes of killer whales. Also, pardon me if I do reference my notes every once in a while. This is a lot of information to share, and I wanna make sure I get it correct. So we have, turning this right side out. Actually, let me back up. Killer whales can be found in like every single ocean. They're found all around the world, which is why it would make sense that there's a bunch of different types that eat a bunch of different things. So we're gonna differentiate the different ecotypes of killer whales by their location. So first, starting off in the northern Pacific Ocean, you have my personal favorite, which are resident killer whales. So these guys tend to live in one area in these close-knit family pods, hence the term resident. And there are specific resident populations, like the southern resident killer whale that lives in the San Juan Islands off the coast of Washington State. There's also like northern resident populations. And these are the ones that have been highly studied, highly cataloged, just because they come back and hang out in the same area year after year and are very consistent. These guys don't eat like birds or other marine mammals, like we may think that killer whales just eat everything in the ocean. They eat primarily fish, specifically a lot of salmon, because that's what's found in the water there. Hanging out and around the same environment is the transient killer whale. So these are probably what you think of when you think of a killer whale. These guys don't stay in one area, they travel around a bunch. As a result, a little bit less is known about them. And they eat seabirds and marine mammals. So this is your like typical top predator of the ocean, eating everything it can find, kind of idea of a killer whale. Then there are offshore killer whales, which live offshore and pretty far away from land, and we really don't know a lot of things about them because it's hard to find them. But some evidence suggests that they're eating sharks. So if you've ever seen, I can't 100% guarantee you this, but if you've ever seen like a video or heard news of like killer whales are so smart they figured out how to kill great white sharks, it might be those offshore sharks that are doing that. Offshore whales that are doing that. So that covers the northern Pacific Ocean killer whales, your residents, your transients, and your offshores. And even though they all kind of live in the same ocean area, and transient whales and resident whales do cross paths with each other, they don't fight with one another, they're not eating the same food, and they actually even have different patterns of communication with one another. So resident whales will actually use their like clicks or calls throughout the water to communicate with each other a lot more than transient whales do. And one of the theories of why this happens is because resident whales eat fish. The fish aren't likely to listen to the whales talking or can't pick that up. But transient whales eat other marine mammals, which would be able to hear those transient whales communicating. So if the prey can eavesdrop on the transient whales, they're not going to want to make a lot of sound, so they don't scare their prey away. So much information. So here we have our main body part of the killer whale, and we've got to decorate it. We've got to add on its eye patches, add on its saddle patches. So to do that, very simply, you just take one and pin it to approximately, for the eye patches, just behind where you want the eye to be located on the whale. And you can just try your best to like make sure they're even on both sides, but if you don't, it's okay. Nature isn't perfect, and my sewing sure as heck isn't perfect. And then to take care of our saddle patch, that goes right behind the dorsal fin. And I tried to kind of line up the center of it as best as possible with that center seam. But it's okay again if it gets a little bit crooked. Each whale has a unique eye patch and saddle patch, so You gotta keep that up. And I'm gonna go ahead and sew around this using a zigzag stitch and sewing really close to the edge to prevent any fraying. So I'm gonna go do that real quick, and then I'll be back to talk about the remaining, what are we on, 7 killer whales that I haven't talked about yet. Saddle patch and eye patches all attached. I'm going to trim the threads that have just been created, and then I'm gonna insert the eyes just in front of the eye patches. So moving from the killer whales found in the Northern Pacific, let's go to the Northern Atlantic Ocean. There are 2 types of killer whales that live in the Northern Atlantic Ocean, and boringly enough, they are called type 1 and type 2 killer whales. The fun naming that makes sense for how they live kind of disappears after the Northern Pacific. So type 1 killer whales are eating like herring and mackerel. These are the guys that are up in like off this coast of like Scandinavia. Herring, mackerel, and there's also the potential that they could be eating seals. Obviously, unless we catch a whale in the act of specifically eating something, it can be hard to completely ascertain what exactly they're eating. The type 2 killer whales have been specialized to eat or have adapted special powers. That's not how evolution works, but let's say they have certain powers that allows them to eat larger whales. So, yeah, so killer whales will eat other whales, and it's kind of, whales are really impressive. So you got these like killer whales, which are big, but nowhere near in comparison to like blue whales or gray whales. But gray whales and blue whales aren't super aggressive. They're eating a bunch of plankton. So the killer whales are taking them down because they're highly evolved predators. But also at the same time, like the blue whales and the gray whales and all the other baleen whales, which are giant, are like fighting back. And it's just crazy that like, I don't know. I'm just always amazed by like nature's ability to hunt things, but also, ooh, that's really crooked. Grab some water real quick. Like nature's ability to hunt things, but also nature's ability to like defend itself from hunting things. Okay, I got these eyes on really crooked. So he can be quite special, but we still love him. So we're gonna set aside this part for now. We've talked about the dang it. We've talked about the Northern Atlantic ones, so let's get these fins together, and then I'll tell you about the 4 remaining types of killer whales that live in the Antarctic. So for the fins, each one will be made up of 1 piece of your main fabric and 1 piece of your contrasting fabric, and you will pin those right side together, and they are slightly directional, I think. So, or I'm really bad at cutting pieces out. These should match up, but they are. Jeez Louise. How did I? Anyhow, I'm gonna pin these together, right sides together, and then they get sewn around the curved part of it, so the straight edge is gonna be left open for turning right side out. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin that together and sew those together. I will be right back. All right, these guys are sewn together, so I'm gonna trim kind of around these seams real quick and then turn them right side out. While I talk to you about the remaining 5 killer whales that live in the Antarctic, which I told you 4 earlier, and if I could do math or count, it's actually 5 that live in the Antarctic. And again, these are boringly named with letters. So first off, we have type A. These guys are free, like they live in ice-free waters of the Antarctic. Let's see. What do they eat? Oh, there we go. These guys also eat other whales. Delicious. So these guys live in the ice-free route of the Antarctic, and they are specially evolved to hunt other whales. I believe specifically they go after pods of minke whales. Then you have your type B1 killer whales. Not just B, there's a type B1. And these guys live in the pack ice of the Antarctic, and they're preying on what is called pinnipeds. So you may be like, what the heck is a pinniped? You already know what a pinniped is. Pinnipeds are just the name for walruses, seals, and sea lions. So they all live in a group called the pinnipeds. And if you've ever seen, like, I love these videos. They're like kind of sad, but they also make me laugh at the same time because I love killer whales. But if you've ever seen the videos of killer whales all teaming up together to like wash seals off of ice floes, you're looking at a video of B1 killer whales doing that. All right, so we'll get back to the Antarctic killer whales in a second. I have my fin pieces all turned out, and I have to pin these guys. They're currently doing the lawn outside the house for the apartment. Again, they do it like 3 times a week. So if you hear a buzzing noise, that is what's going on. So we have to pin these guys, the main fabric facing the main fabric on our whale upper body piece, just between the eye patch, wrong fin, between the eye patch and the dorsal fin. So I will hold this up for you in a second so you guys can see what I'm doing. So it should look like this. These are pinned inwards, so you can see the contrasting fabric facing up, main fabric facing the other main fabric, and I'm gonna quickly baste these in place just to hold them still. All right, these guys are held in place, and our next step is we're going to pin the belly piece, again, right sides facing down, all around the circumference of this upper body piece, making sure that the fins are tucked inside the whale. So let's talk about those remaining 3 killer whale types in the Antarctic. So I just mentioned B1. Now we're going to talk about B2. These guys also live in the pack ice, but they are a little bit smaller in size. And instead of preying on like pinnipeds, so again, those walruses, seals, and sea lions, they like to eat penguins. Which, I mean, is sad if you're a penguin, but is good for you if you're a killer whale, I guess. Specifically a B2 type of killer whale. Then there is the, oh my gosh, comes after B is C, the type C killer whale. And I want to say these guys eat fish. Let me double check. Yes, these guys are also small. These guys also live in the pack ice in the Antarctic, but they're eating fish. So that distinguishes them from the B1 and B2s, which are again living in that pack ice. They're all living in the same environment, but they're eating 3 different things. And the type Bs and Cs will often have like kind of a yellowish color to them, yellowish brownish color to them. And this is because coats of diatoms or algae will get on them and give them that coloring. So they actually look a little bit physically different. Finally, the last type in the Antarctic is type D. And these guys are probably the most different looking killer whales of the whole group. They have a really tiny eye patch and they have a bit of a rounder head. So these guys look vastly different than other killer whales. And their diet is still pretty unknown just because, again, they're living in the ocean. It's really, if we can't see them and we can't really see them eating stuff, it's hard to know what they're eating. But it is suggested that they eat fish. So that is our 10 different ecotypes of killer whales that are recognized, and scientists are still debating whether or not there should be more. There's a lot of different populations of killer whales that live off the coast of certain places that each have different behaviors and are doing certain things. Like you may have heard of those killer whales in localized areas that have been like attacking boats and sinking them. But not all killer whales are doing that, only certain groups of them. So maybe there will be someday like a boat sinking ecotype of killer whales. I don't know. Also, part of me thinks that whole thing is like, it's really sad because like it's kind of scary that killer whales are sinking boats, but at the same time, like, yeah, killer whales, get it. Like, we have done a lot to the planet. Killer whales should be able to fight back, you know? Like, they're doing it. So yeah, so there's different ecotypes of killer whales. And they're all living in, to a certain extent, different geographical locations. But even the ones that live in the same geographical location are eating different things. They have different behaviors, and they're not necessarily interacting with each other, which is really interesting. You would think they would, like, different families would fight with one another and stuff like that, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Not cased. Dear heavens. Okay, so I'm going to sew around the whole outside of this, but I'm gonna make sure to leave a gap. It's kind of up to you where you want to leave the gap, but personally, just for ease of where things are located in this, I decided to leave my gap between the dorsal fin region and the tail just about here. Yeah, here, just so I didn't like not sew down these fins or anything. So I will be right back with that. Okay, all sewed up, sans gap left for turning out. I'm gonna go ahead and trim up some of these excess seams and just keep on talking. So killer whales are sociable, very sociable animals. Like I mentioned, specifically, especially those like resident populations live in very tight-knit family. They're called pods. So a group of whales is called a pod, where the oldest female is actually the leader of the pod. So the killer whales live in a matriarchal society, which I just find pretty rad. And killer whales are considered to be the top predators of the ocean, meaning that pretty much nothing is trying to eat them. Sharks will attack them, a few things can eat them, but for the most part, they're pretty much left alone because they, if they wanted to, could figure out a way to eat everything in the ocean. So because of this, there's actually, sometimes they clash with humans, especially those fish-eating killer whales will eat the fish that humans want to catch. When our food sources overlap, the killer whales are often worse off for it. And the ones that eat like seals and sea lions and sea otters and stuff like that are actually a very good population controller of those seals and sea lions. So in the same way that like we're allowed to hunt deer, and it's actually sometimes a good thing for the environment because too much deer is bad for the environment, so hunting deer keeps those deer populations in check. Killer whales help to keep some of like the sea otter or sea lion and seal populations in check as well. Oh, his eyes be so crooked, but he be so cute. Look at how cute. So he's all nice and turned out. So I'm gonna go ahead and stuff him. And killer whales are really smart too. So this is, I apologize, this is kind of a sad story, but it's also very interesting in a way. So back in the 1970s, back when they were like still would capture living killer whales, like killer whales out in the wild for aquariums, which is only allowed, I think, today and still in Russia. Everywhere else has banned it. 5 killer whales got trapped in a sea pen in Petter Bay, and these were all transient killer whales, meaning if we recall anything, they just spit out with you, which is okay if you didn't, because I'm sure I'm talking really fast. The transient whales are the ones that like to eat marine mammals or birds. They don't eat fish. And until this time, people had only caught like resident whales. So they were like, oh, killer whales eat fish. This is what killer whales eat. We do not know that they eat anything else. So these 5 whales got trapped. They were all transients. And the people, they were trapped for transfer to Sealand of the Pacific, which was a marine park very similar to SeaWorld. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to stuff a dorsal fin. And the people were trying to feed them fish because that's what they thought the killer whales ate. And the killer whales were not eating because they were transients. They've never eaten a fish in their life. So one of the whales actually ended up dying because of starvation because they just weren't eating these fish. And in the meantime, so there are 5 whales in this pen. One of them dies because of starvation, and 2 of them do end up getting transferred to Sealand of the Pacific. And their names are Kimo and Nutka. So these 2 whales are off at Sealand of the Pacific. One of the whales has died in the sea pen, and the 2 remaining whales that are left in that sea pen, still alive, are actually end up getting like released shortly thereafter. Somebody just kind of comes in during the middle of the night, weighs down the net, and lets them go free, which is good for them. And so at Sealand of the Pacific, the whales are introduced. So Kimo and Nutka are introduced to a whale already in captivity there called Haida. I don't actually know if I'm pronouncing these names correctly, but they're whales, so I hope they're not too offended. And Haida, prior to captivity, was a resident killer whale, used to eating fish, and had been living in captivity, and so was used to eating the dead fish that was provided to him in captivity. So these two whales, having Chemo and Nootka having been transients, didn't even recognize fish as a food source until Haida came up to them with a fish and showed them that it was food and ate it in front of them and taught them that this fish was actually a food source. And then the whales began eating the fish as food after it had been explained to them that it was in fact food and they could eat it. So that's actually a very sad story, but a very interesting kind of phenomenon of like, and how intelligent these animals are, that they, oh, I also got his fins really crooked too. He's just a little crooked, but I love him. Very interesting that these whales are smart enough to be able to teach each other different behaviors. And that's also like, you can kind of understand how so many different family groups got formed, because they are so unique and have their own personalities. All right, I'm gonna finish. I think I finished spitting out at you a lot of things I know about killer whales. You're probably information overloaded. So I'm gonna finish stuffing this bad boy. We had hairy Potter last time. Now we have whaley Potter this time. Yeah, I'm not funny. But I try. So I'm gonna finish stuffing this. I'm gonna stitch up this gap, and I will join you in our reveal and wrap up. All right, my whale is all stitched up and finished, and really crooked eyes aside, even with the crooked eyes. I love him, he's so cute. He's so excited to join the pod with this one. Remember, if you want to make your own very pot of whales, only $2 on my Etsy shop, and $2 for a whole afternoon of fun and as many whales as you want to make. Today's fun fact we're gonna rate is actually like probably my favorite fun fact of all times, so I really hope you like it too. But it's that killer whales are the only known marine predator of moose. You heard me right. So moose will actually swim in the ocean sometimes and like can dive to go collect seaweed and algae, and it's been reported that killer whales have known to eat them when that happens. So rate that fun fact in the comments below. I personally think it's like, a million on a 10-point scale, but that's just me. And share it with your friends. It's a great conversation starter. Please subscribe to this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much for sticking around and watching. Please follow me on Instagram. I post every Tuesday and Friday. Please make your own whale. If you do, tag me in it on Instagram. And remember to always keep it sciencey. Nope. Not enough enthusiasm. Alright, come on, lovely babies. We are going on floor over here.